Does Jason Garrett have LinkedIn? Or what are the other sites? Monster.com? Is that still a thing? You might need to brush it up there. Update the old account. The amazing thing about the game you just heard is that the Cowboys, despite looking atrocious, after this week at 6-7, will still be in first place. No matter what happens to the Eagles, who are a game behind them, well, they've already beaten the Eagles. Dallas is already 4-0 in the division. Dallas at 6-7 will still be in first place in their division. Kind of roundabout way of doing it. But that was a remarkable performance. The defense was not good tonight, if you're the Dallas Cowboys. And Dak Prescott had a bad night. But for Dallas now, losers of 3 straight and 4 of their last 5, they started out 3-0. Since then, they are 3-7. The crazy part is if you look at the playoff odds following this game, the Cowboys coming into the game, had they had won, they would have had a 77% chance to make the playoffs. Had they lost, which they did, they still had a 70% chance because they're in a horrible division. The NFC East is awful. You have the 2-10 Giants, 3-10 Washington, 5-7 Philly, 6-7 Dallas. And Dallas holds the tiebreaker right now over everybody in that division. They're bad. Could Jason Garrett, who not long ago, Jerry Jones said will coach the remainder of the season, which is not exactly the most resounding compliment. Would they fire a coach who's technically in first place, even if you have a losing record? It's a mess. Fun Monday night football, or Thursday night football game. Fun way to start the week. A lot to discuss. The Avalanche, the Nuggets get wins. We'll have our Nuggets and Avs insiders, Matt Moore and Adrian Dater, with us this evening. Talk about the Denver Broncos as they get after their second win, potentially. Really potentially, in the Drew Lock era. Continue to look a little bit at this game and what it means and what it might mean when you compare it to the Broncos situation. Next. Things are a little rough down in Dallas after the Cowboys dropped their third straight game. They have lost 4 of 5. And things are looking pretty bleak, or they would, at least if they were in a better division than the NFC East. The funny thing is the Cowboys will still lead after this week, no matter what. But they look bad. Their defense looked bad against the Bills. It's looked bad against the Bears. Now, give the quarterbacks they faced a little bit of credit. Josh Allen looked good, and tonight Mitch Trubisky looked good. Mitchell Trubisky, by the way, and the Bears have won 4 of their last 5. And the last 3 straight. Not exactly being a murderer's row, to be honest. The 4 wins are ahead of Detroit, the Giants, Detroit again, and then the Cowboys. But don't look now. But Mitchell Trubisky's been playing pretty well in this 5-game stretch. 3 of those 5 games, he has 9 touchdowns and 2 picks. Against the Rams, he was 1-1. Against the Giants, not so good, 1-2. But he completed 70% of his passes against the Lions the first time, 76% the second time. He completed 74% tonight. Trubisky's in this last 5-game run has had 3 games with a quarterback rating over 115. He's been playing very well. The Bears have turned things around a bit here. That's pretty fascinating. And then you give a look at, say, we look at the atrocious NFC East, and then look at the NFC North. Packers are 9-3, Vikings are 8-4, Bears are 7-6. That's a pretty good division. They all beat up on each other a little bit, but the Bears are 3-1 in that division. Not really looking that bad for Chicago all of a sudden. They will find themselves in the mix rather rapidly for a playoff spot. They have some really tough games left at the Packers, at home against the Chiefs, and at the Vikings. So maybe it's not in the cards. But they're getting better. Trubisky's gotten better. 4 touchdowns today, 3 through the air, 1 on the ground. So going to the Broncos game and where they fit in this particular equation, they have a lot of challenges in front of them playing against a very good Houston team. The Broncos have a lot of injuries. They have injuries on defense especially. You really only have 1 wide receiver. Your tight end position is a big question mark still. The line doesn't look great. Ron Leary has been in the concussion protocol. But look at what happened after Leary left the game. When you look at the youth on offense, at one point, they had 4 rookies, actually multiple times in the game, 4 rookies, 4 second-year players, 2 third-year players, and Connor McGovern at 26, being the most experienced guy on that offense. It's really young. And we look about the Broncos' challenges on offense, and we look at the idea that there is a great deal of inexperience on the roster. There's also a great deal of inexperience on the coaching staff. Vic Fangio is a first-year head coach. Rich Scangarello, a first-time offensive coordinator. Did the Broncos maybe overestimate their ability to identify guys that could immediately make big-time changes into their organization, despite the fact they didn't have experience? The Broncos are in a rebuild. We've talked about that since the preseason. The Broncos are in a rebuild, whether they want to admit it or not. So if they don't want to admit it, who cares? Because they are. You'd hope they want to admit it, because then they could at least understand, and everyone could understand that that's the process, and the Broncos would stop going and chasing the Joe Flaccos of the world, trying to convince themselves that there's something they're not. They are a young team. They need to commit to that youth. But they have a youthful offense, a first-time offensive coordinator, a first-time head coach, and a rookie quarterback now. That's all perfectly okay if you understand as an organization what you're doing. If you understand we're going young, we're going to try to get these guys on first-time deals, rookie deals. Hopefully they all blossom so we could have a Drew Lock and a Cortland Sutton, a guy like Philip Lindsay, who wasn't drafted but does not have a very high dollar deal. Get a lot of these guys at the same time, Noah Fant, and hopefully there's a window that could open before the budget blows itself to bits. I don't know if the Broncos sort of realized that, but it was something that was apparent all offseason, all preseason, and all season long. This is a team that was not really ready for prime time. Early on, they seemed to have convinced themselves that they were ready for prime time. As the season's gone along, you've seen the Broncos start to make some changes. At one point, the defense turned itself over. They decided to take Adam Gotsis out of the starting lineup, move Shelby Harris from the middle to the end, bring in Alexander Johnson. Bryce Callahan's injury required a cycling of cornerbacks. Devontae Bosby looked really good. Of course, then he got hurt. And now they're still working to see if Isaac Yiadom is salvageable or if they want to commit to a Devontae Harris. These are all important choices, of course, because Derek Wolfe, who is now out for the year, is an unrestricted free agent. Chris Harris Jr. is an unrestricted free agent. So they've gone in a direction on defense where they were willing to try some things. They've done that on the offense to a certain extent because when they traded Emmanuel Sanders, they had no other choice. They had to see if they could find anybody to step up and be a second wide receiver. They have not yet. Tim Patrick had a nice game. And then in this game, he just vanished. Against Minnesota, he was good. Minnesota, he was really good. Then he caught one pass for 3 yards against the Bills, and then nothing against the Chargers. So the Broncos have some work to do here. They are very young. And over the course of the program, we'll talk about what that means. But I want to move over to the Denver Nuggets. The Denver Nuggets tonight go to the Big Apple. And, well, they put it this way. They end their very brief losing streak. Wasn't a very large losing streak, all of a couple of games. And one was against the Lakers. But the Nuggets came to play to start off their road trip tonight. They absolutely demolish the New York Knicks tonight. 129-92. And when I say demolish, I mean demolish. When you're talking about having a game where you have multiple guys in double figures, you know, maybe you go, wow, they had 4 players in double figures. Oh, that's good, right? The Nuggets had 8. 8 guys in double figures tonight. They rolled the Knicks. We'll have our Nuggets insider, Matt Moore, join us to talk about it next. The Denver Nuggets go to 14-5 after knocking off the New York Knicks. Knocking off, that's a nice way of putting it. 129-92. The Nuggets had 8 players in double-digit scoring tonight. Joining us now, courtesy of Budweiser, is our Nuggets insider, Matt Moore. Matt, obviously we know that the Knicks are a bad team. I mean, they're not good at all. Did this feel like a get-right game, or was it almost too easy?
I don't think it was a get-right game for the things that are primarily the issues for Denver. I think it was probably a get-right game for the shooters. The bench, obviously, with so many guys in double figures off the bench. I went back and rewatched after the game, just got done with that, and just so many open looks, like night and day versus the Lakers that are rotating on a string and closing out with long defenders. You got Knicks defenders completely asleep on the weak side, and so Malik Beasley and Will Barton and Jamal Murray and Gary Harris, everybody's knocking down threes because the help defense is just so bad. Some of the passes from Jokic, the assists were nice, but they were also like real simple stuff that's like if you're going to defend him like that, he's just going to tear you to pieces. Maybe it'll spark him, but I do think it was a step in the right direction, obviously. The biggest thing is just like, look, this is how you build a regular season resume. You beat teams like the Knicks, you beat them bad, and you move on to the next game.
In Jokic's case, by the way, the 8 assists was equivalent with also no turnovers, so obviously very efficient today as well. The other thing that's nice is nobody played more than 26 minutes, and that was Monte Morris. He was their minutes leader. They have a game tomorrow against the Celtics, a much more maybe of a statement game. So this is basically perfect, right? You go ahead and roll a team you should beat. Nobody has to put up big minutes, and then you can get ready for the second night of a back-to-back.
Yeah, it's about as ideal as you're going to find. That game's going to be a lot tougher. They play Boston well. They match up really well with them. They should be able to compete. You would like to see Michael Porter Jr., I think, a little bit more in this game. This is an opportunity, but Malone is just so tired of them wasting leads that he needs to get a few, I think, dominant performances where they don't let the team get back within it, the opponent get back within range. So I think that's part of it. But, yeah, this was a real comfortable type of win. I think it was the kind of game that it is nice to break a 2-game losing streak. It's nice to get a reminder of, like, how easy things can be. That's maybe the building block. It's like, okay, like this, how do we execute versus the teams that have no chance against us? All right, this is how. So we sharpen up. Maybe we can do these things versus teams like Boston.
You talked about this last time we had John. We talked about the last game, that maybe this road trip was an opportunity. You used the term bunker mentality for these guys to go ahead and go on the road. It'll be their longest road trip thus far in the season, to go ahead and get themselves kind of on the same page, a little bit of team bonding, team building, whatever it is. Is this basically the best kind of start where everybody gets to play and everybody gets to contribute?
Yeah, I think it's good because it's, guys that may be frustrated, especially those end of the bench guys. The guys are at the very limit of the rotation, right? I think Malik Beasley, Jamal, Juancho Hernan-Gomez. Malik had a huge night, and I think it's just really good. He needs those kind of nights to feed him. He's in a contract year. You want to have opportunities to show what you can do and to keep comfortable, to show that you can score. That's big. I think also just like, look, this team has really struggled to shoot. They've just really struggled to shoot. They hit 21 threes tonight. That's big. If this team gets into shooting rhythm, not only is that going to make their offense, which has struggled so much, way better, but that can spark Jokic a little bit, because if they're bombing from deep, then teams are going to have to start worrying about that a little bit more, and that opens things up for him. And so maybe the reverse can happen, where instead of Jokic getting going to get the offense going, the offense gets going with shooting, and that opens up Jokic. Like that may be like an optimistic view of what this game can really mean long term.
They did shoot 54% from three-point land, which is impressive. If you're going to nitpick, they actually shot worse from the free throw stripe than the field, 55.6 to 56.3, something that in a close game you can't afford to do, but in this case doesn't seem to matter. I do want to go to Porter Jr. because, as you brought that up, the Nuggets want to find a way to get him in and get him some minutes, but they want to do it in a blowout. In this case, obviously, because the Nuggets have let teams back into it, they didn't want to do it. But Porter, in 5 minutes, had 6 points, 2 for 4 shooting. Both of those were threes, and 3 boards in only 5 minutes. Did you see enough from him in a little spurt that is it meaningful? What can the coaches take away from that? What can Porter Jr. take away from that?
I think Malone talked about this morning, that it's going to continue to be hard to get him minutes because he knows how talented he is, and that he's going to have to. I think Malone knows that these are the situations where he needs to put Porter Jr. in, and he's just too worried about if they let up that lead and it got late, and now all of your comfort in terms of the minute load going into the back-to-back is messed up, and it's another frustrating loss, and guys are wondering what's going on. He's just trying to get a few comfortable ones, but these are the ones where you got to play him. It's good that he's hitting threes. That's a big part of it. Is if he's hitting, it's easier to play him because that's why he's on the floor, is to make shots. He's not there for defensive versatility. He's not there for hustle plays. He's there to get buckets. And so when he comes in and he misses, it's like you're not giving him anything. You're not providing anything at all. But I do just think it's going to be hard for him to continue. Malone knows he's going to bend on this, and it's just tough with how deep the rotation is and how many mouths there are to feed. I think that Porter's going to have one game where he really just absolutely lights it up, and that can spark getting him more. But he needs an opportunity like that. But I don't know when he's going to get that because Nuggets are too good to be down in blowouts, and they haven't been good enough to blow anybody out either. So this was an opportunity I think that was wasted in not getting him more minutes.
We're talking with our Nuggets insider, Matt Moore, Hardwood Paroxysm on Twitter. Give him a follow. And I guess sticking with Porter for a minute, when you're talking about young players, and I know fans want to see it, and I know the Nuggets they're 14-5. There's no reason to push him in. But the development of young players like this, especially a guy that did not have any significant, or at least not very much significant college experience, is there a way that he can really learn what he needs to do on defense where he's basically a non-factor? Can he really learn all this in practice, or is there sort of a ceiling in practice that he's going to hit, and he has to be able to get minutes on the floor to figure it out?
Well, not only that, but they don't practice. NBA teams don't practice, right. And as the year goes on, it gets harder to. You don't have you have to coordinate practice space. You have to coordinate where to do it when you're on the road, at home. You have to take the opportunity to get some rest. And the other thing is they've Malone did this 2 years ago, and it worked wonders. He basically inserted an incentive program where you win the game, you don't practice next day. And that's a big deal for those guys, not having to come in and getting that free time. He can work all that stuff in drills with training staff and in optional workouts, but it's not the same. And game environment is different. And the other thing is this stuff comes with time. Most young players are bad defensively. Almost all young players. Luka Doncic is terrible defensively. He's absolutely horrible, and he's an MVP candidate. So, you have to be able to work through those problems and learn it over time, and the margin has been smaller. I think a lot of it is if the Nuggets get better, then there's going to be more opportunities for Porter. Those things are tied. The Nuggets haven't been good enough to afford minutes for Porter Jr., and Porter Jr. hasn't been good enough to demand minutes from a competitive Nuggets team.
Well, we talk about trying to fit Porter Jr. in. That's difficult, but let's go even down the road a little bit. Bol was assigned to the Windy City Bulls of the G League. That seems to be a good sign because obviously we know about the health issues, trying to put on weight. There's a lot of physical things that the Nuggets want to see Bol go ahead and accomplish before they even consider trying to even carve out any minutes that even Michael Porter Jr. can't get. But when you look at Bol's situation, sending him out to the G League again is a really good sign regarding maybe his health and his physical development, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, well, he's on a contract that demands he's there for the majority of the time, and they have to manage his minutes and his days up with the Nuggets. So that's part of that's always been the plan. It'd be better if the Nuggets actually had a G League team, like 28 of the franchises in the NBA do, so they could send them to their own guys with their own system, with their own training staff, with their own facilities, hopefully somewhere closer than Chicago. But they don't, so here's the situation. He's played well. The reviews have been really good. I talked to a league scout that does a lot of work in G League. The showcase for that league is coming up here in a few weeks, and he said he's been really impressive. They've actually really thought the Bol was better than expected in G League play. So there are positive signs there. I don't think it means anything for this year, but long term, I think it certainly does. Again, I think it is a waste though that both he and Vanderbilt are unable to get minutes because the Nuggets don't really have a dedicated G League team closer. I think that would be better for them in the long run.
Yeah, that's obviously a topic to discuss on another date as well, because it is a very interesting one when it comes to player development for the Nuggets, who are so deep right now. But eventually, let's face it, they won't be. There are guys that won't be here that are on this roster probably next year, maybe even by the end of the year. So, Matt, thank you very much. Looking forward to this game against the Celtics tomorrow. I kind of want to see what the Nuggets do, especially if they get, the entire healthy Celtics this time, or at least as healthy as they get. See how that shakes out. So, thank you very much for the time, and we'll catch you next week.
Hey, talk to you next week, John.
All right, take care. That is Matt Moore. And we'll have a chance to talk to. I said next week. I really mean tomorrow because we'll talk to him after the game tomorrow. Obviously, Matt Moore is brought to you by Budweiser, the official beer sponsor of the Denver Nuggets, and we'll follow up with him regarding that game against Boston. That is a national game, ESPN television, an opportunity for the Nuggets to prove that the last time they took the Celtics out, it was not a fluke, but this time, well, they might get a full dose of Kemba Walker. We'll see how that goes as well. Look forward to checking in with Matt tomorrow. Heading back to the Denver Broncos. Talked about the inexperience involved here when it comes to coaches, when it comes to players. Our old friend Joel Klatt had a couple things to say about that. Want you to hear what he said next. This morning with Mike Evans and Mark Schlereth, Joel Klatt, as he usually does, a man who was, on that program as its host for years here at The Fan and since has become one of the best college football analysts in the business, comes on and talks with the guys about the challenges, about the Broncos' inexperience. And they haven't experienced in a lot of places. Like I mentioned, after Ron Leary went out with his concussion, there were many different times in which the Broncos had personnel out there that were top to bottom, basically inexperienced. Only one player, Connor McGovern, even in his fourth season. One of the things that I've questioned and before and even this morning is the idea that the Broncos' youth in their coaching staff, or at least the inexperience in their coaching staff, Vic Fangio's case, Rich Scangarello's case, these guys are both first-timers at their jobs. Add a rookie quarterback into that and Drew Lock, and Joel Klatt is concerned that could be a recipe for disaster.
You cannot have two inexperienced entities. It never works. You can have two experienced entities. You can have one old, one young at either quarterback or play caller. You could have an old quarterback, young play caller, or an old coach, play caller, and a young quarterback. Very rarely do you see success with two inexperienced people. And even people are like, well, what about Sean McVay? Sean McVay had a ton of experience growing under guys that really understood play calling and game plans specifically. And so I wouldn't say that he was inexperienced last year. He might have been inexperienced in the Super Bowl because he hadn't been there yet. But as a coach and a play caller and an offensive game planner, I think he had a ton of experience, which is why he was able to allow Jared Goff to grow so much. So to me, I don't think that you can have two inexperienced entities. So I think that if you're going to go with Locke, I think you would need to make a change personally.
Wow. Well, I don't suspect the Broncos are going to do that over the next 4 games. I do think there's a chance that they will do that in the offseason. To me, it seems like Rich Scangarello is already being completely prepped to be the fall guy for the Broncos' 3rd straight losing season. Whether I think that's fair or not fair, I'm not entirely sure it's fair, to be totally honest with you. But I get the point. Let me go over Scangarello's coaching history for you, and we'll go backwards. Obviously, offensive coordinator for the Broncos. Prior to that, 2017 and 2018, he was the quarterback's coach for the 49ers, working with Kyle Shanahan and learning there. But he was the quarterback's coach. Now, he has been an offensive coordinator before, but only for 1 year, and at Wagner, a pretty small school, an FCS school, and he did that back in just the 2016 season. Prior to that, the Atlanta Falcons 2015, he was the offensive quality control coach. At Northern Arizona from 2012 to 2014, he was listed as the quarterback's coach and then / offensive coordinator. 2010, 2011 at Millsaps in the Southern Athletic Conference, a D3 school. Millsaps, assistant head coach, quarterback's coach, offensive coordinator. Then with the Raiders 10 years ago in 2009, offensive quality control coach and assistant quarterback's coach. Prior to that, a lot of it was at UC Davis and at Idaho. Scangarello, it is fair, I think it is fair to say that it is maybe a little unusual for someone with his resume to be an NFL offensive coordinator at this stage. The resume in and of itself indicates that maybe the Broncos rushed him a bit. A little more experience would have been valuable. I think that's not an unfair thing to say. But the Broncos knew this. The Broncos could look at his resume just like anyone else, and they still chose to bring him on in this role. So I guess I look at it at times and go, well, what did you expect? What did you think he would be? Did you think he was going to be an elite offensive coordinator from the get-go? Probably shouldn't have. Seems pretty unwise. But he is inexperienced. And Drew Lock, of course, is a rookie. He is inexperienced. And the challenge with having two guys that are inexperienced is the idea that it might be a little harder for Rich Scangarello to come up with plays on the fly or even week to week as they adjust to moving to Drew Lock to make sure that he's in the best possible scenario to succeed with regularity. So that's one of the challenges there. He's not terribly familiar with Lock. He's still getting used to calling plays within a game. Quite frankly, and I've said this before, when the Broncos are on script, I see some things. I see some plays that have good design. Yes, there are some turkeys in there too. It'd be fine if I never saw a tight end jet sweep again in my life. But you watch any NFL team over the course of a season, and it's not excusing Scangarello, but if you watch all 16 games of any NFL team, you will see a handful of plays where you look at it and go, why in the world did they do that? Scangarello can do better and should do better. But I don't necessarily look at it and think it's been a disaster. The raw talent there, when you look at his ability to design plays and have them flow together, when they're on the script, they don't look that bad. Especially given the dearth of talent on this offense. This is not a deep and talented offense. They don't really have a tight end yet. They have one wide receiver. They have a bad offensive line. There is, to an extent, a ceiling on what Scangarello can do with this. There really isn't that much talent on the Broncos offense. Let's be honest about this. There's not that much. But I think he has it in him. But then the question is, what do you do in game? And that's the biggest challenge. And that's not necessarily where Scangarello succeeds yet. The question I have is, why did the Broncos think he would? No experience. And if you would have maybe hired a head coach who had more head coaching experience, was used to working with an offensive and defensive coordinator, maybe there was a little bit of help that they could provide. But Vic Fangio's a first-time head coach. He's unfamiliar with being able how to help out his offensive coordinator in that kind of relationship. So all this is new. And there are interesting concerns. Now, we talked about a couple weeks ago, Jason La Canfora's story from CBS that there were challenges with the communication with Vic Fangio and his assistants. And I've told you where there's smoke, there's fire. Doesn't really make any sense for La Canfora to invent anything about a non-competitive team with a head coach that nobody really knows across the league, the average fan. Well, we got some evidence of some of that today. Want to play what Vic Fangio said about the Broncos' final drive, which was not really much of a drive, but one play, shot down the field that ended up in a pass interference against Cortland Sutton that led to Brandon McManus's 53-yard game-winning field goal. Want to play what Vic Fangio said on Sunday after the game. Rich Scangarello had a chance to give his side of it. The differences are striking. Play those both for you to compare and contrast next. On Sunday, following the Broncos win, Vic Fangio said some interesting things. Actually, first thing that was interesting that we broke down earlier this week is the idea that Vic Fangio took credit for Brandon McManus's game-winning field goal, saying that the reason that McManus hit the game-winning field goal is because he didn't try a 65-yarder at the end of the first half, which is a very interesting angle on it. Fangio then sort of let that fight simmer, and yesterday ended up bringing that up with McManus again, pointing out that McManus in his career there's proof that if he were to try a long one, it means he'll miss other ones, which I personally think is a bit of a stretch, but that's the way Fangio's tackled it, and he's kind of dragged that out over multiple days. Well, on Sunday, on the Broncos' final drive, they tried the deep pass down the right side to Courtland Sutton. Sutton was interfered with, which allowed the Broncos to kick a 53-yarder as time expired to get the win. After that game, here's how Vic Fangio explained how that process went.
The first thought, that the offensive coach said, just take a knee, and I said no. First I was looking for a play that could get a big chunk over the middle, bang a timeout, and we didn't like that as much. So I said, well, let's go down the sideline and see what happens.
Okay, so if I'm to understand that, he was pretty clear in what he said. The offensive coordinator didn't mention him by name, which I thought was interesting, but whatever. The offensive coordinator wanted to take a knee. That's what he said specifically. And I said no. I pointed out on Monday's program that thump you heard was the sound of the two different axles of Vic Fangio's bus running over Rich Scangarello for about the 12th time this year. Scangarello had a chance to talk today down at Dove Valley, and he had a very different take on the story, and one that, let's say, is a little more detailed.
Yeah, it's funny. It's kind of become something, but the crazy part about it is what's gotten lost in all this is, man, I'm fired up for the players, how it all ended. Like, it was great communication, and the reason we won was the communication, and what was interpreted and all that is what it is, but it really didn't go down like that. And the players executed a play that we had practiced all week, that we talked about in 2 minutes. He gave us the green light to take the shot. We walked out on the field. We walked through it Saturday morning, that exact play against that exact look, and the Cortland executed it perfectly. Drew did a great job. The line protected, gave him 2 hitches, and he gave him an opportunity to win the game. And McManus went out there and was clutch and kicked down the middle. Like, those are the cool things that are the outcomes of all that. What was said and all that, the communication was great. And the question was, do you want to kneel on it or do you want to take a shot? And he wanted to take a shot after the kickoff return, and that's what our plan was all along. There was no indecision or anything, and we were able to go out there and do it. It was Vic's credit for saying take the shot. That's his call, not mine. And we went out and did it, and I'm proud of it, and we can build on it, and it's a good thing.
That was offensive coordinator Rich Scangarello, and I think what was interesting about that statement is, one, it is very thorough, it is very detailed, and two, it tracks completely with how football teams work. You practice scenarios, wondering and expecting if you're going to need them. Now, Scangarello's argument on it is they did practice that play, had discussed that play in exactly that kind of scenario. What Scangarello did, knowing there was a minimum time on the clock, and knowing the head coach has the final say on what they're going to do, Vic Fangio has said multiple times he has veto power, he has full control, and he should. He's the head coach. Scangarello basically said that what he did is, where we're starting, coach. Do you want to go with what we practiced in case, or are you more comfortable taking a knee right now? And let Fangio made the call. That's what Scangarello as an offensive coordinator is supposed to do. He's supposed to offer the options and let the head coach make the decision. And Scangarello credited Fangio for making the right decision. Didn't take a lot of credit for it himself. I thought was rather humble and polite about it. But mounted a pretty thorough and reasonable defense because everything he said kind of works the way it works on a football team. Going back to the situation a couple of weeks ago when Jason LaCanfora of CBS wrote his story on November 17th. Read you a couple passages from it. Broncos coach Vic Fangio has been having a difficult time connecting with players, and coaches in his first season in Denver with his often gruff demeanor rubbing many the wrong way and creating internal tension within the team, according to multiple sources with knowledge of the situations. Going down a couple paragraphs, said Fangio's at issue with offensive assistance, the sources said. And at one point, top receiver Emmanuel Sanders, in essence, walked out on the team, leading to his eventual trade. Lines of communication have been strained. Fangio has been quick to dispute play calls and come across as overbearing on the headset, sources said, which created issues in game and otherwise. There is a negative reaction to almost every offensive play call, said one source. Going down a little further, other sources noted a disconnect between the offense and defense as well, with Fangio's people skills and their mind lacking. Pretty much everyone gets treated like, and they substitute the word crap, said one source with knowledge of the situation. I'll tell you what. These two guys about this situation are telling two very different stories. And I'm going to be completely honest. After hearing them back-to-back, I find Rich Scangarello's to be more believable. I do. I think it's a more believable take. It was detailed. It explained the situation and explained that Scangarello basically did what he's supposed to do. Did Vic Fangio make the call to take the shot? He sure did. But Scangarello had already had that situation practiced out, prepared, and just asked Fangio, hey, it's late in the game. Do you want to take that gamble, or would you just rather kneel? That's what he's supposed to do. And for Fangio to basically say, the offensive coordinator wanted to kneel, I said no. Very different. These two guys are telling very different stories. And this is happening, by the way, in public, following a win. You have your head coach and your offensive coordinator basically calling each other out for being less than truthful through the media following a win. And in this case, the offensive coordinator is the one that sounds more believable. Everyone who dismissed Jason LaCanfora's article went, oh, yeah, there's no reason that's the truth. Hey, everyone's heard it, and there was your evidence right there. If nobody had asked Rich Scangarello about this, the end result is Fangio basically just gets the final word and says, my offensive coordinator's an idiot. He didn't want to go for it. But I did, and that's why we won. Also, we won because I told the kicker he couldn't kick at halftime, and that's why he kicked the other field goal successfully. James Marilat, we had him on yesterday about this. He pointed out that Vic Fangio, and correctly so, is very quick to take credit for the things that go right. Sometimes, in this case, like McManus's field goal, direct credit. I bet that does rub people the wrong way, especially when his team has blown multiple fourth quarter leads, has mismanaged the clock with regularity, and you never hear him talk about it after the game, saying, you know what, that bad clock management, on me. When the defense coughs up last-minute drives. Vic Fangio isn't going, you know what, guys? Defense is my baby. It's on me. It's an interesting situation. As the season continues to sort of fall apart, even though there is reason for optimism with Drew Lock, people are going to start carving out their own areas so the blame is assigned somewhere else. It's disconcerting at times to see the head coach do it. I have my moments. The Colorado Avalanche keep it rolling, and then they get great news before the game. The captain is back. Gabe Landeskog is back. Was he really ready to go? Oh, he was. Our Avalanche insider, Adrian Dater, will join us to break down the Avs and the Habs next. The Colorado Avalanche got healthy and got another win on the road. Gabriel Landeskog comes back to the Avs lineup. The injury that he has had cost him 16 games. He's passed. Joining us now is our Avalanche insider, Adrian Dater, courtesy of Bud Light. And AD, now the Avalanche, all of a sudden, it's sort of remarkable. Mikko Rantanen comes back after missing his lengthy stay away, comes back and has a phenomenal first game. Landeskog returns tonight, just as you suggested last night, and punches in one of his own.
Yep, it was another good night, Sean. I mean, you come into Montreal, you're always excited to be here in this fantastic birthplace of Hockey City, and they just kind of won a similar game, and I think they kind of won last night too. And Toronto I thought they were in control for the most part, even though Montreal did have a pretty good third period and made things a little interesting in the end. I always felt like the Avs were pretty much in control of this game. And, getting out to a 3-0 lead certainly, made things easier for them. It kind of put things on cruise control a little bit probably in the game after that. Probably need to still work on some of that part of their game a little bit. Not getting too, not sitting back, but I don't think they just got soft or anything after that. They just, that's another team over there too. They're NHL players that scored a couple goals, but the Avs won the game. That's the bottom line. On to Boston.
Yeah, sometimes with a young team, and this team is still by and large pretty young, that complacency can sometimes happen, especially if you get off to that really early start. It feels like maybe you've got this, it's easy, and then you sit back. But they did get it done. As we're noting also that Andre Burakovsky returned from his injury. Pavel Francouz made the start today, but they also did not have Nazem Kadri. That was a bit of a surprise to me. Is that anything to be concerned about?
It was a surprise to me, too, and a surprise to everybody around here. It seemed like he was just fine last night. I talked to him personally in the locker room. Didn't look in pain at all. I saw him relaxing with his family after the game in the stands. There was a large contingent of Kadri's friends and family at the arena, and certainly looked in good spirits. And today comes and find out he's not going to play. I know he took some treatment at the Bell Center today, but apparently, he's got something that prevented him from playing. I don't know what the injury is, but when I asked the team about it, it's like, well, he'll be further evaluated in the upcoming days. That sounded a little creepy to me at first. Maybe that isn't as bad as it sounds. Maybe they're just gonna look and see how he feels Saturday and make a determination from there to play against Boston, maybe. But the Avs are not practicing Friday, so we probably won't know anything further until Saturday. But it wouldn't seem anything serious. And then again, I don't know what it is, so I can't say for sure. And let's hope not.
In hockey, obviously basketball fans are used to the load management idea. Now that they have Burakovsky and Landeskog back, do hockey teams basically do the same thing, Adrian, at times? Do they basically say, hey, this guy's been a little stiff, a little sore, it's not serious, but since we have some other guys ready tonight, we don't need to send him out?
Normally they don't do that. Maybe toward the end of a season, if a team's really got things wrapped up, you might see a player get the night off occasionally, but generally that's not a hockey thing. The load management thing is not a hockey thing. You will see them players not practice quite a bit. The old cliched maintenance day for practice happens a lot. But generally guys, play the games, and I don't think Nazem Kadri is in any kind of load management situation here. I think he wants to play every game and loves to play. So I'll try to find out more tomorrow about it, even maybe tonight. But, again, it's hockey injuries are like, all right, do I want to become Mr. Detective and try to find out it's a bruised foot or something, or do I just want to, basically leave it at that and not because I've done that in the past where I've been the super detective man trying to find out every little injury thing, and sometimes you find out. More often than not, you just tick off everybody in the team, and players hate you for it. So I don't know. Maybe I'm mellowing a little bit in my old age. I'll just. They say he's not playing. That's good. You know, that's just going to have to be good enough for all of us. And then hopefully Saturday we'll have a new story to tell.
Well, Gabe Landeskog did play and got that goal. How did he look it's been a long absence, 16 games, a decent amount of time. Obviously, he had the goal, but to your eyes, how did he look? Did he look as sharp as, say, Mikko Rantanen did in his first game back?
Well, it's hard to compare that one with Mikko getting 4 points.
Right, a little apples to oranges there.
Fine. See, I thought Rantanen looked a little tired and out of shape in that first game, and yet every puck just sort of bounced right on his stick, and he hits 4 points. I think Rantanen's still trying to work himself into real top-notch cardiovascular conditioning, skating conditioning. But I thought Landy looked good. I know he's been working real hard off the ice with Sean Allard, their skills coach. You know, he pushes them pretty hard. He came off the bench right before his goal. He was coming off the bench, and so the puck just pops right to him at center ice, and he goes the distance with a bunch of dekes and everything, goes around his man and puts a puck far post. Great goal. Yeah, I thought he was fine. I mean, I think he was definitely engaged and didn't look slow to me, and great first game back, really.
You suggested last night that both Landeskog and Burakovsky would be back tonight, and they were. You also suggested there was a possibility that the Avs might toy with mixing and matching a couple of their line combinations, because in the absence of Rantanen and Landeskog, guys like Burakovsky, although he's been out, and Donskoy have done a really, really good job and meshed very well with Nathan McKinnon. Did you see any indication that some of that might be happening?
Well, the lines got mixed up again with the absence of Kadri. So Landeskog played on, I guess you'd call it the second line with, I think it was Comfer and Burakovsky. Donskoy was up with McKinnon. And, Calvert was up there, and Nieto was up there. I thought... he keeps having to figure out some wings by committee, but I think the bottom line is that I think you'll see McKinnon, Landeskog, and Rantanen back together again, assuming Kadri isn't hurt long term, and Kadri I would assume, go back to a Donskoy and a Burakovsky on his wing. I sort of hate to see Donskoy move off the line with McKinnon, the way they've played together, and maybe that will not. Maybe he will stay together with him. I think what the Avs would love to have is the full lineup back together. Try those lines again, see what there's going on, and if Donskoy and Burakovsky work great again with Kadri, then that's your second line. That's a great second line. We know what the top boys can do together. So, you'd think that would be the line. And then, third line, you've got your Jost, your Comfers, your Nichushkins now, who's taking on a more prominent role in this team, your Calverts. So it's, but they're not healthy yet all the way around, so you kind of have to keep just sort of, ad hocing it through the games here.
Well, the guys get healthy at the right time, assuming that Kadri is not serious. They go now to Boston on Saturday, take on the 46-point Bruins, one of the best teams in the East. This is kind of another one of an opportunity to make a statement. It's the on that long road trip, you go ahead and go out and get this done. So far, so good. But the Bruins are a different animal.
Yeah, they are. They're definitely having a real good season. They keep. I think they lost in overtime to Chicago the other night at home, and they've been playing a little bit less top-notch hockey than they have been, even though they sort of find a way to get a point every time. Yeah, it's going to be a fun game, though. That will be a marquee game for the night. I'll be interested to see how Landy does again in Game 2 and ramps. And nice to see Cale Makar come back and play in the Boston area. Of course, he spent 2 years at UMass up the road, and I'm sure he's going to have a bunch of buddies there for that game if they're not playing that night. I don't even know UMass's schedule, but it's going to be fun. It's always fun to be in Boston. That's That's my old home ground basically, and I'll get to see some family and friends too. So that's always a nice thing to say, right?
He is our Avalanche insider, Adrian Dater. Make sure you follow him at adater on Twitter and at coloradohockeynow.com. Go check that out. Enjoy the trip to Boston, and we'll catch you next week, hopefully talking about another Avalanche win, but it's already been a successful road trip.
Okay, Sean, take care.
That is Adrian Dater, our Avalanche insider, courtesy of Bud Light, the official beer sponsor of the Colorado Avalanche. The Avs get it done again. They are absolutely red hot. And now they're getting healthier. So that is exciting. The idea that Von Miller missed a game, that's an unusual one for Broncos fans. Didn't hurt them in this case, but it was really unusual for Von Miller. Our stat of the night is next. Our stat of the night really comes from Sunday. And that's when Von Miller had his 95-game streak, including playoffs, stopped by a knee injury. Miller hadn't missed a game since 2013. And it was a bit of a surprise he couldn't go. Fortunately, it didn't hurt the Broncos when it comes to, as Bill Belichick said, the final scores for winners, which it was. Broncos ended up winning that game, and so Miller ends up getting to rest. It is funny sometimes how I'll look at Ramoslaw.com text line, is 303-713-1043. A lot of the time on the text line or in the calls or on Twitter, I get a lot of people who get a hold of me and basically say that maybe Von Miller isn't giving the effort they want, or Von Miller isn't doing what they want to see. And you get that narrative at times, quite frankly, even from Vic Fangio, who's consistently called out Von Miller about not being better. One would think, given everything that Von Miller's done for the organization, how consistently he's been not good, but spectacular, Hall of Fame caliber, Von Miller might go into the Hall of Fame if he retired today. He might still make it. He's been that good. But the idea that he's maybe doesn't care so much, or maybe he's relaxing, or maybe he's taking it half speed. I want you to listen to what he said today down at Dove Valley and then see if you feel the same way.
It was hard. It was extremely hard. Like, I cried real tears, 30-year-old man. It was extremely hard for me. I thought, especially at the beginning of the week, in the way that I healed over my career, I thought I was going to be able to, put it out there. But MCL is such an important ligament, and especially with my game. If I was, standing back off of the ball, like if I played D tackle or something like that, or, inside backer or, anything like that. But all exotic movements, I really couldn't do it. And my game has a foundation in exotic movements. So, I took it all the way up into the deadline and just couldn't do it. And I couldn't even say it. I couldn't even say, I wasn't playing. I had to let them make that call, because in my head I had already geared my mind up. I was ready to go. I went to sleep the night before, went through all of my pregame rituals, everything that I do. I was getting ready for the game, and just I couldn't do it.
Miller, with the MCL sprain that he discussed, obviously is concerned about it and should be. I am not I'm not 1/1,000,000th the athlete that Von Miller is, but I tore my MCL last year, and I can tell you that it makes a big difference. It makes a difference on regular movements. If you're Von Miller, I can't even imagine. And obviously this bothers him a lot, just missing the one game. This game is, the Broncos were 3-8 going into that game. Another 4-8. I look at it and think, if Von Miller has an MCL sprain, they're 4-8. They have 4 games left. They're not going to the playoffs. This is a Broncos team that is shockingly conservative with injuries. Bryce Callahan hasn't played the whole year. They didn't even want to put him on the IR. Then eventually they did. Juwan James has been medically cleared for weeks and doesn't play. Drew Lock could have been activated and practicing a month earlier than he was. So why on earth should Von Miller play a single game the rest of the season? I can't even imagine a single argument that you can make that says he should. I'm not a doctor. I don't know how serious it is or whatever. But he has an MCL sprain? Nah, forget it. Why? Why risk it? It's Von Miller. He's your best player. By far, he's your best player. When teams scheme against the Denver Broncos, and I try to identify players, single players, that can wreck what you want to do for the day, the Denver Broncos have one that the opposing teams look at. Von Miller. That's it. Cortland Sutton is getting there. Bradley Chubb, when he's healthy, is getting there. Chris Harris is always in the discussion. But the only guy that any other team is really worried about on this team is Von Miller. That's just what it is. I'm of the mind that if Von Miller has a pinky toe injury, the season's over. They're not going anywhere. Miller can't do anything except collect stats and potentially get hurt playing on a sprained MCL. And as he's pointed out, if he hurts that knee, part of the things that make Von Miller special, he called it, the exotic moves. What it really is Von Miller bends and gets low better than anybody in the NFL. Maybe Khalil Mack. But that's it from that position. Why would you want to risk that ability if there was a chance he could tear that MCL? I don't care what kind of brace you put on it. I remember the brace I had on mine all last year. I looked like RoboCop. Wasn't great. Definitely wasn't going to go run around and play football or do anything. But why risk it? I've talked about this, for the last week and a half now. This is the Broncos 2020 preseason. Right now, this is it. Would you play Von Miller with a sprained MCL in a preseason game? No. No, you wouldn't even consider it. I know players want to play. I know Von Miller wants to play. Talked about crying real tears. I know he wants to be out there for his teammates. And I know he'd like to rack up some stats too. But you have to do what's better for your guy, better for your player. I wonder if the Broncos just shouldn't shut Von Miller down for the year. Forget it. You added Jeremiah Atachu. You hope that Justin Hollins can maybe do a little bit. That's fine. Again, get the other guys some practice. Get the young guys some practice. Because it doesn't matter if you win or lose the rest of these games. These are about evaluating individual players and coaches for the rest of this year. There's no reason to play Von Miller at all. Even if there is a 1% chance that Von Miller tears his MCL by playing on a sprain somewhere in the next 4 games, why would you take it? So the team can go 6-10 instead of 5-11? Is that worth risking Von Miller? Give me a break. The Broncos have been so careful, maybe overly careful with some of their players. I don't think Von Miller should play another down this season. What's the upside? I don't care what the odds on the downside are. The downside's disastrous. What's the upside? Nothing. Gets a handful of sacks, put on stats. Who cares? The Broncos are conservative with their players' health. They should be conservative with Von Miller's. Maybe more than anybody's. I know he wouldn't want to hear it. But I'd tell him to go ahead and forget it. We'll see you at OTAs in the spring. That's the way I'd look at it. When you look at the Broncos going forward, too, talking about Drew Lock and evaluating players and coaches the rest of the way. Rich Scangarello looks destined to be the fall guy for this season, fairly or unfairly. I personally think unfairly. Let's say, hypothetically, the Broncos move on, as Joel Klatt suggests they should. What should they do? What should they look for? What should they look for if Drew Lock really looks like an NFL quarterback? Want to know what you think? RamosLaw.com text line is 303-713-1043. We'll discuss where the Broncos should go, if they decide they have to go anywhere at all, next. All right, Broncos country, you ready for a thought exercise? By the way, a lot of feedback on the idea that Von Miller should be benched for the rest of the year instead of playing on a sprained MCL. Let's just say that even though I expected that to be a little controversial, apparently it is not. Folks on the RamosLaw.com text line, which is 303-713-1043, seem to be in unison, saying that that should be the way it goes. 720-681. Sean, I agree with you. Sit Vaughn, no need for him to play. Just got to say, your show's the only one I listen to on the Fan after listening for many years. Keep up the real talk. Well, you can listen to the other ones. The other ones are great, too. Listen to all of them. Catch every single one of them. You can do that on demand, by the way, on 1043thefan.com or at the Fan app. It's free. You can catch every show, every interview on demand whenever you want. But thank you very much for the compliment. I do try. Let's go down the road of what I think is going to happen. We've talked earlier about the challenges that Vic Fangio and Rick Scangarello have to be on the same page. Not as play callers, coach, but as, agreeing on facts, basic facts. Visibly this week disagreeing with each other on how things went at the end of the game against the Chargers. Quite frankly, thought Scangarello's argument was more believable than Fangio's. And it fits a certain pattern. But given that the Broncos' offense is very poor, there is no other way to put it. It's very poor. They just don't score a lot of points. Now, I don't think they're very talented, and I don't think Rich Scangarello picked the players. But I'm being facetious there. I know he didn't pick the players. I know he didn't pick any of them. He got handed what he got handed. And what he got handed was not particularly talented and not particularly deep. The most talented player on offense is the most dependent position on the offense in wide receiver, and that's Courtland Sutton. And he has nobody on the other side to take pressure off the double teams. But there you go. That's where they're at. Nevertheless, I'm going to presume that Scangarello is going to be the fall guy for this bad season because this would be the Broncos' third losing season in a row, the first time that's happened since 1972. And the Broncos are going to want to make it look like they're doing something. So you have to shuffle the deck chairs on the Titanic. And I presume that Scangarello's is the one that's going to be thrown overboard. Don't like it. I don't think it's fair. I get the arguments that folks like Joe Klatt will make that it's a disaster to pair a rookie quarterback and a rookie play caller together. It probably is. Of course, that's really not Rich Scangarello's fault, is it? They're on their third quarterback of the year. The plan, by the way, was to pair your first-year play caller with a really veteran, really experienced quarterback, but he got hurt. So I'm not sure what you're supposed to do about that if you're Scangarello. If you look at, and it's obviously a very small sample size, but if you look at the personnel groupings for the Broncos, in the first 12 weeks of the season, including the bye week, the Broncos have a pretty straightforward personnel grouping. Prior to lock starting, 54% of the time, they're in 11 men. It's 11, which is one running back, one time. You'll hear that sometimes. 11 personnel, 12 personnel, 21 personnel. You'll hear that thing on sports talk or on TV broadcasts. If you don't know what that is, what it means is the first number, it's not really 11 or 12. It's really more like 1-1, 1-2. The first number is the number of running backs that are on the field. The second number is the number of tight ends that are on the field. Obviously, you have a quarterback and 5 linemen, and so then you can discern the other number is going to be wide receivers, so the 11. So in 11 personnel, you have a quarterback, you have your 5 linemen, 1 running back, 1 tight end. That leaves you 3 wide receivers. The Broncos run that personnel grouping 54% of the time under Flacco and Allen. Under Drew Lock, in his debut, they ran it 47% of the time. Not a significant change. Not with that small sample size. Very few of the things actually changed. The 12 personnel, which means you have one running back, two tight ends, two wide receivers. The Broncos normally run 15% of the time. They ran it 17% of the time with Lock. Again, statistically irrelevant with the small sample size. Same with their 21 personnel. 16% normally, 15% with Lock. Their 22 personnel, which is a two tight end, one wide receiver set, they run 8% of the time normally. They ran it 8% of the time with Lock. The only difference is the 13. One running back, a three tight end, one wide receiver. Well, you can imagine, what are you going to do in that formation? One running back, three tight ends, one wide receiver. You're running, right? I mean, that's what's happening. You're running. The Broncos normally use that 4% of the time. Last week's game, they used it 13% of the time, more than triple the normal. That indicates, of course, that as you saw, as all of us saw, the Broncos went into a shell. They went into a shell early. Drew Lock looked great in the first quarter, went 9 for 13 in the first quarter, threw 2 touchdowns. And then the Broncos basically stopped passing for the remainder of the game. Looking at this going forward is going to be interesting to see what Scangarello is doing, because he's having to now adapt to his third quarterback of the season, his least experienced quarterback. Brandon Allen hadn't thrown an NFL pass until his first game with Cleveland either, but he at least been in the league for a few years. So Scangarello is now asked to basically shuffle things around for a third straight quarterback, different one, and do it on the fly. Basically, nothing significantly changed on the way the Broncos set up their personnel groupings, except for the fact that they ran in a heavy run formation a lot more often, which is exactly what you saw. If you watched the game, you watched that first quarter, you might have been thinking, oh, wow, let's see what happens with Drew Lock here. And then they just went into a complete shell and were fortunate to win the game, quite frankly. Now, people will blame that on Rich Scangarello, because that's what, apparently, out of Dove Valley, that's the word. You just blame Scangarello. That's what you do, right? But here's the trick. As Vic Fangio pointed out, he has the final word for that. He decides that. So it's Fangio, man in charge of the team, that basically wanted the Broncos to go into a shell. And they did, and they still won. So, you can argue it worked out. But it becomes really hard, I think, to look at what Scangarello is doing and presume that he's doing a good job or a bad job, because he doesn't have autonomy. He's a first-year coordinator. It's not like you have Gary Kubiak out there where your head coach is like, just call what you call. It's not a relationship between Bill Belichick and Josh McDaniels where McDaniels just kind of calls what he thinks he should call. It just doesn't work like that. Should the Broncos be more creative? Should they open it up? They should. I'll still crunch these numbers for you, and I'll bring them to you next week, and we'll see what changed. We'll break them down. But it's not all on Scangarello. Some of it's on Fangio. Scangarello now has to try to find a way to change what he's doing. Put it this way, 13% of the time, if the Broncos are in 13, 3 tight end sets, they're going to lose this game by an enormous amount of points. It's got to get opened up. Some of that's on Scangarello, but a lot of that's on Fangio, letting him do it. That means taking risks, means taking chances. We'll find out if the Broncos will do it on Sunday. We will look back at sports history with our time machine next. All right, the time machine today takes us back to 1987. On that day, the Heisman Trophy was awarded to Notre Dame wide receiver Tim Brown. As talented as a guy coming out of college in that year that you had seen for a while. I mean, he was unbelievable. Went on to be a 9-time Pro Bowler and is a member of the Hall of Fame. But I bring up the Tim Brown anniversary of his winning the Heisman because it actually was the spark of one of the best underrated moments in the history of the Broncos and the Raiders rivalry. Some of you may remember this, some of you may not. So, following the 1993 season, that was in Brown's career, his 6th year, and the first season in which he really blew up. 80 catches, 1,180 yards, 7 touchdowns, his first 1,000-yard season. Now, he would go on to have a 1,000-yard season every year from there through 2001. The Broncos saw what was coming. They saw what they were after. They realized Tim Brown was special. They had this guy at quarterback, John Elway, who could throw to him. And decided, let's go see if they can get Tim Brown. So, back in March of 1994, Tim Brown was a restricted free agent. Kevin, I'm guessing you weren't even alive.
I was born in 93.
Okay, there you go.
So I was just
So you were still in diapers when this happened, and I wish I didn't ask. Okay, so moving along. Tim Brown, as a restricted free agent, you might forget, during the still very red-hot rivalry, the Raiders that year, following the 93 season, the Raiders were 10-6, and the Broncos were 9-7. Both teams made the playoffs. In fact, the wild card game that year was the Raiders against the Broncos, the L.A. Raiders at the time. The Raiders knocked the Broncos off in a lopsided 42-24 game. In that one, Tim Brown actually caught a 65-yard touchdown pass from Jeff Hostetler. And the Broncos receivers at the time were Arthur Marshall and Derek Russell, if you remember going back that far. So they looked at Tim Brown as a, obviously, significant upgrade. Here's the funny thing. Despite the fact that the Raiders were doing well, Brown actually, might forget, signed the offer sheet with the Broncos. He was a restricted free agent. He signed his free agent deal to join the Denver Broncos, an $11 million deal over 4 years, including what was a no-trade clause and a signing bonus of $3 million. At the time, the Raiders director of football operations was Steve Ortmeyer. Ortmeyer said, and I quote, "There are parts of this contract that are difficult, almost obnoxious, I would say. But Al," meaning Al Davis, "is out of town and we won't start reviewing it until early next week." Of course, the Raiders had a small amount of time to do that. At the time, Wade Phillips, who was the Broncos coach, said, "No matter what happens is fine because it still helps us. It's a win-win deal. We made a blockbuster offer to a guy we may get. If we don't, we force them into a situation that will hurt them." And that was at the time, that's what they were doing. Basically, the Broncos were like, "We'd love to get Tim Brown. It'd be great." And it would have been great. But if you don't, you make the Raiders overpay. I mean, the director of football operations said the contract is difficult, almost obnoxious. Nevertheless, only a few days later, obviously as Tim Brown is not a Hall of Famer from the Denver Broncos, the Raiders announced their decision 2 days before the deadline, with Ortmeyer saying, "This was not a tough decision. While there's some outstanding value out there in the unrestricted free agent market, there was no one we felt had the value of a Tim Brown for this team." Well, they were right. But that led to one of the more entertaining moments in the long Broncos-Raiders rivalry. Back at a time when these two teams would literally just try to sign the other guys to try to tweak the team. Not even really caring if they got them or not. Just to jab the other one. Just a little burr under the saddle. I miss that. I don't know if that's ever coming back again. Maybe it will in Las Vegas. Who knows? But 87, Tim Brown, named the Heisman Trophy winner, en route to his Hall of Fame career in the NFL. Broncos find themselves at least in a somewhat similar situation. Back then in 93 season, their best receiver was Shannon Sharp, their tight end. But when Derek Russell is one of your starting wide receivers, ooh, and admit it, you didn't even remember he played for the Broncos. Totally okay. Broncos need to find other help beside Cortland Sutton. This is one of the things they have to do to get to where they want to go. They are trying multiple guys. They are, presumably it was Tim Patrick, but the last 2 weeks, Tim Patrick has one catch for 3 yards. That's it. That's, let's just say, not good. So where they'll go with that going forward will be fascinating to see in this next game and over the next 4 weeks. The Broncos know I think they know they don't have the answer on the roster. I think they're fully aware of that. Deshaun Hamilton actually outsnapped Tim Patrick 37-32 last week. Nobody else really got significant offensive snaps. Spencer got 2, Fred Brown got 1. That's it. The week prior to that, Hamilton and Patrick each had 32 snaps. So what you're watching, and I think it makes some sense, Patrick is more of a third wide receiver, more of a possession guy, not big speed. I think the Broncos are probably going to try, as frustrating as it might be for Broncos fans, and Hamilton dropped another, would have been easily 15 to 20 yard gain. In that contest against Minnesota, Patrick had 73% of the snaps. To Hamilton's 52. Since then, Patrick's gone from 73 to 65 to 56 in 3 weeks. The simple truth of the matter is the Denver Broncos want to see if they can do anything with Deshaun Hamilton, if they can establish him, if there's something they can do, and they seem to be willing to give him the reps to find out. I actually think that's the right plan. You know what Tim Patrick is. There's nothing wrong with Tim Patrick. But you know what you'll get out of him. Tim Patrick's 26 years old already. You know what he can do. Deshaun Hamilton's case, Deshaun Hamilton is 24. He's trying to get established. They hope that maybe something with Drew Lock will spark it. Expect to see more of that. But I can tell you already, Deshaun Hamilton's not going to be Tim Brown. Cortland Sutton might be Tim Brown. Looks like it of late. The Colorado Avalanche got a win. The Denver Nuggets got to win. Denver team's looking good tonight. We'll catch you up with what they did next. As the Denver Broncos get ready for their game against the Houston Texans out in Houston on Sunday, big game for Drew Lock, big game for Houston. For the Broncos, what does it necessarily mean? Maybe not all that much in the grand scheme of things. But there are other teams in Denver that are doing their thing too. The Denver Nuggets and the Colorado Avalanche, to be specific. And both of them had success this evening. The Avalanche were out, they're on their way to Boston for their game on Saturday against the very, very good Boston Bruins. But the Avalanche tonight win their 5th straight game over the Montreal Canadiens, les habitants, as they say in Montreal. What? Kevin Kistner's looking at me. What? What?
I didn't know you knew how to speak French.
I do. Actually.
I can't say a single word.
Oh.
No? Is that French?
No.
No?
It's N-O-N. Yeah. No.
No.
So you got that one. There you go. Now you know.
I'm learning.
Yeah.
French 1.
French 0.1. But yeah.
It's more than I learned in high school.
There you go.
I took Spanish 3. I still don't know Spanish.
Yeah. You ever hear the Canadians referred to as the Habs on SportsCenter or something, right?
I haven't.
Okay. Well, but that's what it is. It's habitant. In other words, people who live, inhabitants, people who live in Canada, or Canadians.
None.
Montreal Canadiens. There you go. See, perfect.
That's
man.
the only. That's how I communicate.
Très bon.
Now.
Good job, Kevin.
None. I'm just making sure it's not a bad word in French.
No.
We're gonna get in trouble.
No. No, I could probably help you with that, but not on the air. We'll have to.
We'll do it after the show.
Yeah, after the show. Yeah. The Avs get it done. Gabe Landeskog comes back to the lineup after missing 16 games. Andre Burakovsky, too, after a minor injury, does come back. Sam Kadri does not end up playing in the game. Lower body injury. You know how that works in hockey. In other words, nobody knows what's wrong with him. Lower body injury. He might have a sore pinky finger. I don't know. Our Avs insider Adrian Dater said that he talked to Kadri after the game in Toronto. He seemed fine. Whatever it is, it seems to be relatively minor. We'll find out. Pavel Francouz in net tonight gets 38 saves on 40 shots. The Avs get it going early in the game. They end up rocketing out to a 3-0 lead. Ryan Graves with his 4th on the year, assist from Calvert and Makar. And then Gabe Landeskog back in the mix from Mikko Rantanen. It's going to be nice to have that line back together again. Landeskog, Rantanen, and McKinnon. And then the good thing about it, of course, is that the other guys who have been there, you think about Burakovsky and Donskoy, who have really blossomed next to McKinnon in the absence of Rantanen and Landeskog. That's a great sign because you build confidence. You understand these guys can play. And sometimes having your stars out for a little bit when you have a young team and some guys who maybe haven't made their mark in the NHL, it gives them an opportunity to showcase their talent and get confident in their own abilities. That'll just help the Avs down the road. So they end up with a 3-0 lead at the 8:06 mark in the second. Calvert scores a shorthanded goal. The Avs are off to the races. Now, they allowed 2 more as the game went to an end. But the Avs really weren't particularly threatened in this game. They played well. They looked comfortable. And now they move on. They are 18-8-2. Second in the Central, only 4 points behind the Blues with 2 games in hand. Winners of 5 in a row. The best goal differential in the West. Plus 25, and now they will go play the best goal differential in the East, the Boston Bruins. The Avs are the number 3 goal-scoring team in the NHL. Bruins are number 2. It's going to be some fun for this game on Saturday, especially now that the Avs are getting themselves in a position where they can be healthy again. The Denver Nuggets were on a 2-game losing streak. No more. The Nuggets, who will also, by the way, play Boston, the Celtics, tomorrow. So, hey, next 2 days is Denver versus Boston, folks. Across the board. Denver's going to be invading Boston. Hopefully they can go ahead and get those wins. They get the win tonight, and they get it in easy fashion. 129-92 in an effort that the Knicks coach David Fizdale, the temporary Knicks coach David Fizdale, I think Fizdale's got some talent. But these Knicks are a disaster, and I don't think he's very long for the team. A couple nights ago against the Bucks, the Knicks were down by 43 points in the fourth quarter to the Bucks. And then tonight, the Nuggets run them out of their own gym with a 37-point win. Nuggets scored more than 30 points in every quarter. They had 8 guys in double digits. 8. Will Barton led the team with 17 points, and it was balanced. Jeremy Grant was 16 off the bench. Monte Morris with 15 off the bench. Malik Beasley and Jamal Murray with 14. 12 for Juancho Hernan-Gomez, 11 for Mason Plumlee, 10 for Millsap. Nikola Jokic in 25 minutes, 6 points on 3 for 7 shooting, but does get 10 boards, 8 assists without a turnover. The Nuggets had only 13 turnovers, 38 assists. They were really good tonight. Shoot 56.3% from the field, 53.8% from 3. Nuggets now at 14-5, second in the West. Will go on to face the second place team in the West, the Boston Celtics, who are 15-5. So another opportunity for a statement game. And on the bright side, this rematch from just a few games ago in Denver when Kemba Walker got hurt and missed most of the game. The Nuggets on a 4-game East Coast swing. They have to play the Celtics on the second night of a back-to-back, which is not great. But it is great if nobody on your team has to play more than 25 minutes, which is what happened to the Nuggets tonight. It's about all you can ask for. So that will be an interesting game to follow. We'll have our Nuggets insider Matt Moore with us following that game to break it down as well. Von Miller was limited in practice today. Juwan James are still on track to play. Not expected to play the whole game at this point, but expected to play. I don't think Miller should play the rest of the year. If he has a sprained MCL, look, Juwan James has been cleared medically, entirely. It's about being mentally and emotionally ready, according to Coach Vic Fangio. Von Miller has a sprained MCL. That's why he missed his first game since 2013. I don't think he should play all year long. I think he should just be done. I think he should pack it in. The Broncos have been so careful with their players regarding injury. They waited an extra month to activate Drew Lock. Who knows how long James has been ready to go. Joe Flacco didn't want to go on the IR. The Broncos were concerned about him. Why they'd play Von Miller, I have no idea. I think Miller should rest up, take it easy, and be back for a season that might matter in 2020, not the rest of this one. So, I don't expect the Broncos will do that. I don't expect Miller necessarily wants to do that. But they probably should. I was expecting that take to probably bother people on the RamosLaw.com text line. It did not. Most people agreed. Good for you, Broncos country. Like I said, I know it's not a popular take. It's not fun. Don't like that we're there. But this is the 2020 preseason for the Broncos. You wouldn't play Von Miller, a hurt Von Miller, in the preseason. You wouldn't even play him in any game in the preseason. So don't play him now. You know, Von Miller loves going to the Avs games. Let him unpack his Avs jersey and watch them for this month. Let him go on down to the Pepsi Center and check them out. He probably deserves the rest. Let him pack it in. We're going to pack it in for tonight. Be back tomorrow. We'll hand it over to our friends at Sports Center all night. Break down this Broncos game. We'll follow the DU Pioneers hockey game. Get into this game in detail. Talk about everything that's going on with that. Looking forward to it. Thanks to Adrian Dater. Thanks to Matt Moore. Kevin Kistner in the booth, of course, who just learned his first word in French. It's like a toddler. Congratulations. I'm Sean Drotar. Follow me on Twitter at @SDrotar. Have a good night. It's The Fan.